Welcome back to Formula for Average. We are in orange or papaya colors because it was a, let's say, big day for McLaren, and of course we will discuss it. And congratulations to Norris for winning the Hungarian Grand Prix. But there was a lot of things to discuss through this race, so let's just get into that. And of course, before we get into the race, as usual, let's take a look at what we had for the qualifying. And the qualifying took place, and of course there were some, let's say, controversies, mainly after the qualifying rather than during the qualifying. And during the qualifying, I think the main surprise was that McLaren had such a good pace, and it was surprising in one way to see that McLaren was that good. On the other hand, we must remember that they were good also their last year, and they had some updates and upgrades coming to the car. So overall, I think it was not a surprise that they were so good. I think, on the contrary, it was a surprise that Mercedes was not so good here. And ultimately, Antonelli started lower even than he qualified because of the penalty he received for the yellow flag infringement while Verstappen spun off. But overall, I think the Mercedes have lost their advantage, so it seems, and so that this race also showed. Yes, Antonelli fought back, and yes, also Russell fought back, but there was some issues with the race and how they executed the race. Let's put it that way. And I think there were some items to discuss for Mercedes, especially of course for Russell. And Russell's qualifying session was also not great, as we see he qualified only P7. Yes, started there, but also had issues with the start procedure, which ruined his race basically. But we are not seeing the Mercedes that they were in the beginning of the season, and I think their development rate has been a little bit slower than, for example, for Ferrari or McLaren, and this shows also on the qualifying results. Speaking about the qualifying, also Hamilton, yes, lost out only 12 thousandths of a second to Norris. Overall, I would say good qualifying. Unfortunately, he received a penalty, 3 grid place penalty for impeding Piastri. I guess miscommunication with the team. He obviously blocked Piastri. You can very clearly see that on the onboards from Piastri's point of view. So well-deserved 3 grid place penalty. No argue about that. But I think the whole Hamilton-Ferrari thing is that if they would put everything together perfectly, they would still have a decent chance in this race and also in the previous races. Unfortunately, there is always some sort of mistake, either driver or team mistake, which prevents them for achieving the maximum results. So the whole thing is not, let's say, jolting together as it should, and it seems to me that somewhere still the Ferrari Hamilton thing is not fully there. Although a couple of races back it seemed that they have found their way, but now in the last 2 races, for various reasons, they have not achieved the result they should have, and it all has faded away a little bit, and they have to, let's say, in order for them to outperform Mercedes or McLaren, they have to put everything very nice together, and at the moment, for whatever reason, they can't do it. And before I end with the qualifying, of course, have to mention Alonso or Aston Martin. They had a huge upgrade package for this Grand Prix. Ultimately a B-spec car, or I don't know, you can call it, I don't know, second generation of the current generation of the car. Basically a new car for this race. Yes, their engine is still lacking behind, but for the first time this season they got into Q2, which already shows the progress. So the upgrades are working, so now they have to polish them, and of course, as I said, the engine has to also be improved, and they are bringing engine upgrades to the next race, which is in 25 or something like that days now in Zandvoort in Netherlands, so after the summer break. If that engine is good and if these upgrades are working, I think they will be at least let's say in the midfield fighting for the points, and that would be good to see because they had disastrous first half of this season, and they know that, of course. So from qualifying, I think the overall results, of course, are pretty much more or less as expected. Maybe Alpines have dropped back a little bit, but overall the packing order, let's say, not so different or how we would see normally, or how we would expect to see it. So yes, I mentioned already those penalties. So Hamilton received in 3 grid place penalty, and also Antonelli received 3 grid place penalty for different reasons, of course, but still, with those penalties, I think they did a good race. Obviously, Antonelli did better in the race than Hamilton, and we'll discuss that. And yeah, I think that's it from the qualifying. Nothing more to add there. So without further ado, let's jump into the race itself. And of course, from the beginning, what we must mention, I think if we look at the race start and going sort of in a chronological order, what happened or what were the main things that happened during the race, I cannot understand. As I have said multiple times, I don't believe in luck, or I don't, let's say, like to say that it was because he got lucky or unlucky or something like that. I think you need to earn, let's say, your luck. But misfortunes or whatever is happening with Russell, it's just sad to see. So he started what was P7, I think, and then everything went wrong. His car went into anti-stall for whatever reason. Basically, let's say the RPM dropped, and it was, let's say, the engine does not have power to start, and then it goes into this anti-stall, not to shut down, and that's what happens with Russell. And while he did everything to gain back the speed and the momentum he lost, it was, let's say, yeah, by the first turn he was already like P18 or something like that, so at the very back of the packet. And then, of course, we must say that he fought back and did a decent race with the situation where he was. Ultimately finished P7, fought back, but yeah, it was just damage limitations, nothing much you can do there, starting basically from P18. But yeah, it is what it is. As I said, Mercedes have their problems to figure out, to understand why they are so unreliable in a way, why they do not have this sort of consistency. and on the one side of the garage. Because for Antonelli, yes, he have had in the previous races these let's say technical issues where he has DNF'd, but today in Hungaroring I think he did the best he could, and yes, I think there were various things that helped him, and Ferrari was one of them, and I'll get to the Ferrari a little bit later. But overall, from Antonelli's point of view, I think he did everything right. All the pit stops, driving, pace, everything. I don't think there was much more he could have achieved. Yes, they were trying to, let's say, go with one stop strategy. Maybe it could have worked. I don't know. Nobody could have predicted there will be a VSC. So yeah, it's a big if. So I think in hindsight, yes, they could have done something different. But in the moment of the race, I think there was nothing much they could do differently. And I think pretty much from Mercedes' point of view, from Antonelli's point of view, pretty much perfect race. With where he started and where he ended, ultimately P3. Then of course, so Russell was one guy who had his misfortunes at the start, but then it was not at the start, but still misfortunes for Piastri, and he started very well. He took the lead. Lando misjudged his braking in second corner, or how it's now called, Hamilton corner. This was done before the race because of the 40th, I believe, Grand Prix. They named all of the corners and I think also straights, and now Hamilton has its own corner, which is corner 2, the left-hander. And in that corner, so Norris made a mistake, took it too wide, and Piastri got the lead and everything, and he was good the first stint, and he also said himself everything was good. He pitted then normal pits the first time. In the second stint, Lando was complaining, I think, that he's faster. And he was faster, but he could not surpass Piastri on the track, and from there, I think multiple things went wrong for Piastri. Ultimately, yes, he DNF'd, of course, also, but before he DNF'd, the undercut for Norris worked. It's a big controversy, of course. They did split the strategies a bit, so they extended Lando's sort of second stint. Sorry, I said undercut. It was actually overcut, which worked there, and ultimately Lando took the lead. I mean, I understand why Piastri was frustrated. However, on the other hand, he did not have the pace. And yes, by extending Lando's stint, they sort of put him on the clean air, so he could, let's say, extend his lead. So when he pitted and came back, he was still in front, so he did the overcut. However, I think this was the way to go in this race, because Piastri did not have the pace, and he was not the faster car. So, and I might be mistaken. I'm not sure which was the moment when Perez had his brake problem. No, it was Bottas. First he had a brake problem. Yes, the smoking brakes again. for Cadillac, and then the pit lane was blocked for one lap, and I think there was some kind of I think I might be mistaken, but there were a couple of drivers who he did not pit because of that, and then they extended a little bit that stint. So it might have been Norris or might have been not, I don't know, but basically they extended Norris, thus allowing the overcut. But I mean, if they would have not done that and pitted Norris right after, let's say after the next lap after Piastri, then yes, they still would, then there would have been 1-2 the same. In this case they didn't. So I mean, I understand again why Piastri is frustrated. On the other hand, Norris was faster, so they gave the chance to Norris in a way. And then of course also Piastri got let's say blocked by Sainz, which again is in my opinion penalty for Sainz, and there was a miscommunication. Sainz said himself after the race that he did not see Piastri, so it is ultimately his and Williams' fault. But again, Lando was faster today. That's the ultimate thing that I must say. Lando was faster. Overcut, undercut. Is it fair to keep someone behind if they are faster? And to give, let's say, both of them equal strategies so that they could fight it on the track? Most likely depends on whose fan you are. Either you support Norris or you support Piastri. You will say one or the other. So the team decided this way. They gave the chance for Norris. It worked out. So if there wouldn't have been DNF or this gearbox problem for Piastri, he most likely would have finished very comfortably in the second place. And then we could have argued should they have swapped the drivers or not or whatever. But ultimately, I think the faster driver should win, and that was Norris today. So I think that the end result for Norris is let's say justified and reasonable in this sense. Then enough about I think about Norris and McLaren and Piastri. Let's switch to Ferrari. And Ferrari, I think, hats off to them for trying something different. They went aggressive on the strategy. So they started on soft tires, trying to get the track position, because in this particular track position is very important. They were not fast enough on the straights. They could not overtake on the straights unless there was a huge, let's say, difference, because Ferrari and Hamilton, for example, in the first stint, he was much faster than Verstappen, but he could not overtake just because the straight line speed was not good enough for them. So at the end of the straight, in the corner one, he was never there to overtake. He attempted sort of some 2-3 times, but it was never enough. So it was not a real, let's say, chance to overtake Max. So overall, they did good that they tried something different, but they did not have, let's say, good enough car in the straight line. And in the slow corners, they were faster, but they could not overtake. And then, of course, Hamilton went into also on this sort of aggressive, I think, this second pit stop. After it was still like a half a race left, or at least close to that, and he went for the second pit stop on the hards. And at that moment I thought, what are they doing? I think I genuinely thought that it was too soon to pit. But then the whole reason I think why they did it is to give him, let's say, some free air, because he came back in the track was he P7, no, P6 or something like that. He overtook Hajar very fast, and then he had the clear track, so he had the pace. Yes, Piastri also pitted, so then he had, let's say, Piastri, but it was 2 point something seconds, and it was relatively free track for him and Piastri, and they were catching the rest of the field. So at that moment it looked that actually they are doing good, and he could finish on the podium. Lando first, Piastri second, and then Hamilton. And then I think under the VSC they made the wrong decision. That's my, of course, opinion. I haven't heard or comment what Ferrari have commented on the hindsight. Of course, it's always easy to tell something, but I think they made a crucial mistake here by pitting. In my opinion, yes, they had old hard tires. Okay, fine. It was 20 laps, I think, at that point or something. And there was 14 laps to go. And they pitted, and they put on the both Ferraris. But in my opinion, they should have kept the track position. And track position, I think, yes, Max was at that point already on soft tires, extending the lead, the stint. But I think that the advantage was big enough to hold on Max, especially on a track where it's hard to overtake. And yes, Max overtook Hamilton already once in this track, and it was great overtake. No, I'm not trying to take anything away from Max, and it was great driving from him. But I think that the last pit stop was one pit stop too much for Ferrari, at least for Hamilton, definitely. I think they should have stayed out, keep the track position, and then fight Verstappen on the track. And they took the ultimately the second option. They pitted and they lost track position, and they never were able to get it back. So I think in that sense, Red Bull and Mercedes did the right choice. Of course, Red Bull did not react to Hamilton's pit stop, and that's the thing I truly understand, and I support Red Bull there. Although I didn't expect them to finish, or talking about Max, I did not expect him to last 28 laps on use soft tires, but he did, and that's good. But it was old soft tires versus old hard tires. Meaning before the VSC and the last pit stop for Ferrari. And I thought that Ferrari will keep the track position. They choose the opposite. Ultimately, I think that was the wrong decision. They lost track position. They were never able to fight back to overtake Antonelli. I think they thought that they will take Antonelli during the pit stops, or they will still be ahead. They were not. They were too slow, so Antonelli overtook them, and that was it. As I said, Ferrari were not able to overtake on track, and they made a mistake with the pit stops. So ultimately, I think, and even adding to that, Hamilton had the speeding ticket, or received a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. So I think it was a bad call from Ferrari, especially for Hamilton. And with the Piastri DNF and without taking the pit stop, I think Ferrari or Hamilton should have been P2, or maybe P3 if Max could have managed to overtook Lewis. But honestly, I think not. I think he should have held P2, stayed out, and then fight it on the track. Because in this particular case or track, I think track position was critical. But You live and learn. As I said, in hindsight, it's always easy to tell. At the heat of the moment, yeah, it's probably the simulation told that let's take the risk, so they took the risk. As I said, hats off to Ferrari for being aggressive in the strategy. Good for them. It did not work out. So those are things that I think the main things for the race. Of course, if we take a look at the ultimate results, I already mentioned a couple of things. Norris first, Verstappen second, then Antonelli, and then Leclerc and Hamilton. Hamilton dropped back 5 seconds because of this penalty in the speeding in pit lane. Hajar, Russell, as I said, damage limitations for what he could achieve. I think there was nothing more on the table for Russell after the bad start. Then Lawson, good race from him and from Racing Bulls, both cars again in the points. They are very consistent, and now they have also overtaken the Alpines on the constructors. So going with a good result into the summer break, I think it's very good and very rewarding. Also for Hülkenberg, a rewarding race. Finally, he has been able to get to points, 2 points in particular in this race. Finally, some points on the board for him. And yeah, Bortoleto just outside of the points, but we have to still keep in mind that Piastri DNF'd. So basically, yeah, if Piastri wouldn't have DNF'd, then Lindblad would be out of points. But it's racing, it happens. So yeah, Piastri also DNF'd, and Lindblad got another point for Racing Bulls. As I said, now they are ahead of Alpine. And talking about Alpine, they have lost a little bit their momentum at the moment. They seem to be the fighting with the Racing Bulls. They were sort of on let's say fighting for the best of the rest sort of title of the team. They are not now anymore. I think you can argue that Audi and Racing Bulls have surpassed them, and they are, as we see now, fighting with Aston Martins. And Aston Martins, as I said already, they received their big upgrade package. Good for them. It seems that it's working. Yes, they didn't score points yet, and their only point is at Monaco, but Monaco is an outlier, so I wouldn't, let's say, count that. It was, let's say, yeah, it was, let's say, good result, of course, for Aston Martin, but it's not like a measurement for the season. So I think this was more typical race, what we understand, the more typical track, and Aston Martin was relatively very good, P13, P14, ultimately good race for them, and big hopes for the future, for the upcoming races. So yeah, we'll see what Aston Martin show after also they receive their power unit upgrade. So this will be interesting to watch and see how can they fight back. Yeah, Ocon and Behrman for Haas, relatively, let's say, bad weekend. The same also for Williams, they cannot show, and unfortunately Williams is not showing their sort of development. They are sort of, as they were one of the, let's say, second or third worst team, they are still in the same, and Haas has dropped back and their development is not following as it should. So yeah, overall, again, nothing much unexpected, except maybe Aston Martins are good here, and it's good to see that the teams are getting more competitive, especially knowing how Aston Martin they were sort of the disappointment of the season, I think, together with Williams in a way, and now they are starting to fight back. Then looking at Drivers' Championship, so Antonelli has extended his lead to 50 points to Hamilton, who is still in the second place. Russell with a bad weekend, so now 9 points behind Hamilton, and then comes Leclerc, and Norris has closed the gap a little bit, but of course he's still a long way to go away from the top three. However, I think if the McLaren is proving themselves, and if the McLaren can continue to improve, it will be interesting to see how the second half of the season goes, because yes, 91 points is a lot, which is Norris currently trailing to Antonelli, but if the McLaren is good and if McLaren can be competitive in the next races, it will be interesting to see if they are able to close the gap and climb the championship standings. So yeah, looking forward for the second half of the season. It will be interesting to see how the top four teams basically fight it off, because as I said, it seems that Mercedes have lost their sort of huge advantage. McLaren has learned the Mercedes PU. Ferrari has been developing their car and a lot of upgrades. The same also for Verstappen and Hajar for Red Bull. So the top four teams are more equal, and we never know which out of these four teams will be the best team for the weekend, which is very interesting, of course, from our point of view, from watching the race and seeing how everything goes. On the other hand, of course, Antonelli still has a huge lead. So can he lose it in the second half of the season? I think it will more depend on the other teams rather than on him. So we'll see how it will go, but at the moment it's interesting, and still the championship, in my opinion, is still very wide open. And if you look at the constructors, then Ferrari has, I think they gained back 1 point or something like that, so not huge. So Mercedes is still 72 points ahead. So, but then McLaren is coming and closing, and if Piastri would have let's say finished, then this gap would be even smaller, but it is what it is. So yeah, but again, the teams are fighting, and I think it's interesting to see how this will develop in the second half of the season, because yes, Mercedes is in lead, but they are not, let's say, they are losing their number one spot, and other teams are gaining. So I think it's very interesting from championship point of view to see how this race will develop throughout the upcoming races and the second half of the season. And yeah, Racing Bulls now has surpassed Alpine, and there are also some big fights to come, and let's see if Aston Martin can score more points in the second half of the season and climb the ladder. So it will be interesting. It will be interesting to see. So overall, I think it was interesting weekend. There were a lot of items, a lot of issues, a lot of things that happened during the race. Even though there were not so many big controversies, but it was interesting fight. It was rather close fight for the top teams, and as I have said multiple times already, I think the second half of the season will be very interesting in a sense that top four teams will become more equal, and any of those top 8 drivers can win a race. So that's the most interesting and exciting part for the season. So looking forward for that. Next race we have Zandvoort in Netherlands, as I said, in a little bit less than 1 month, so 25 or something days away. Summer break, so enjoy the summer, keep safe, stay safe, and we meet after the race in Zandvoort. Thank you and bye bye.